That person went away, came back the next year, proposed to us again, got shortlisted, and won the competition. So it's
Right.
Sometimes it's obvious how innovative your idea can be, and it's obvious to everyone else. But more of the time, it's not obvious to everyone else.
Dave, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Andrea. It's very nice to be here.
How are you doing, man?
Very well, yeah.
Where exactly are you located?
I'm in the southwest of Spain, in an area called Cadiz, right on the Atlantic coast.
But you're not Spanish, right?
I haven't been
Don't look very Spanish.
called Spanish yet. I'm from Dublin originally, and I've been living in Spain 17 years, but I'm born and bred from Dublin in Ireland.
What was the reason for you to move to Spain?
Well, love on one side and quality of life on the other, and a few other bits and bobs in between. And since I've been here, the reasons keep piling up because the sun, the climate, the food, the way of living is quite fantastic in all of Spain, I think.
Yes. I also relocated from Czech Republic to Barcelona at some point in my life. But for me, it was more about like going away from Czech Republic rather than going to a specific place in the world, and happened to be Barcelona because Alpha had an office there. Who were you working for when you were moved to Spain?
I was working for one of the language service providers in the industry, Lionbridge, and I was working on the technical side of things. So at that time, I was leading a team of engineers who were working on localization projects to basically build, fix, deliver completed projects, many of them software at the time. So around that time, in the early noughties, we were still dealing with a lot of software in the localization workflow. And since then, while there's still quite a lot of software, the effort required to do it is a lot less because processes and technologies have come to play and build in a lot more automation.
So what I'm wondering is how you got into localization, like in the first place.
Yeah, well, I've been in localization 25 years, and it was the first industry I joined, strangely enough. But it all started back in Dublin, when at the time many folks like me who had been involved in engineering or electronics or computer science were looking for jobs in computer software. So I got a job in testing localized software and content. Dublin in the 90s, just to paint the picture, was really a burgeoning software centre, really just at the green shoots side, but a lot of global companies are setting up their European HQs there. So you had the likes of Microsoft, Intel, Lotus, Sun Microsystems, and many others. So for engineers coming out of college, it was a great landscape. So I worked in localization and localization technology for the next 8 years or so, predominantly.
So when we had our introduction call, we discussed that we will mainly talk about PIC, Process Innovation Challenge, in this interview. So can you maybe describe PIC to the people who are not familiar with it? What is it about?
It kind of goes back a little bit to one of the things we did when I was involved in running engineering teams was we shared smart ideas with each other. Invariably, we're all working on slightly different projects for different customers, but there were similarities in procedures, in file management, build procedures, things like that. I remember very clearly many occasions where I was talking to one team member who was struggling to solve a problem with a build, and then their neighbor would overhear and say, "Oh, I have a script to solve that," and then the other one would say, "Why didn't you tell me that 3 weeks ago?" So it kind of, from that point, we all realized that it would be really good to have a kind of an automation forum to discuss and share innovations that one person had built that could be helpful to another. So this is the kind of originating idea of the PIC. that sometimes we don't realize how great one of our ideas or innovations is or can be for other people. Then jump forward 20 years and I met Ulrich Haynes from Lockworld and Lock Institute at their event in Montreal. We got talking about innovation and my idea of connect innovators and share this knowledge. And he gave me a place to run it. And it really started from there. So what is the pick, you asked? It's really a platform for people to share their innovations to the audience. And the way we do it, we try and do it in a smart way, giving innovators an opportunity to pitch their proposals, try and get shortlisted to join the event. When they get to the event, whether it's online or live at a physical event, they have 4 minutes to pitch their idea. So it's really a pitching competition, if you like, a little bit like Dragon's Den or Shark Tank, depending where you watch your television, and you'll get the idea. We're not as nasty, maybe, as they can be on some of those programs, and we try and create an environment where innovators, many of whom would be more introverted in their approach, to give them an opportunity, a platform, a stage, and the support to pitch in the 4 minutes they have and get their idea out as best as they can. Because sometimes you have to really chip away at the rock to see the gold nugget inside, and that's really what we have seen and why we set this up in the first place.
You mentioned that it's a platform for connecting innovators. Who do you consider an innovator? To me, it sounds like by default, if I think about like the stereotype of an innovator, it's kind of like an engineer, like a techie person who created some tech innovation. But I remember I was doing one coverage of, I think, Slater's article, where the winner was somebody who changed the process. I think she said, like, there's no source text. Like, we are not translating based on source text, but we are like recreating something.
Yeah, that was Giulia Tarditti from Moniz, 2019, right? And it's actually one of my favorite innovations, although I don't have favorites. I'm a bit of an innovation geek, so I tend to like the vast majority of innovation. And it was there was a concept, an idea, but then unusually, to a large degree, there was the data to back it up, to show that actually it made sense to do this. And as you said, her concept was that instead of using source text as the source for translation for certain types of user interface pieces, specifically on mobile applications, what she found was when you used a description of the concept and gave that to translators, then they were able to use the correct side of the brain, the creative side, to actually create better localized copy. That's the concept in a nutshell. And she had proven it and shown the results of the percentage gain and growth of the application's interest. So it wasn't just, it looks better and we like it better. It actually had impact on the footprint that application was able to create and grow. So, as I said, she had the data to back it up. So it was a fantastic concept and idea. And I know many people who saw it actually got, well, this is something that we should consider seriously, rather than something which is maybe limited in its applicability.
Why do you think people should participate or apply for this competition?
There are many different reasons. And we've had people who have a concept idea at an early stage or a late stage. We get a whole mix of things from technology, process you mentioned, conceptual technology, ideas with data. There's a whole plethora of things that can come true. And what we see, what is the common vein that's running through here? It's that you have people who either know their idea is worth getting out there, or they want to share this idea and see if someone else has faced similar problem and dealt with it in a similar way. So they're trying to shine a light to see who else has maybe got some common ground that they can then have follow-on discussions on. Or we have people who have been building something, know it works, and want some guidance and validation from the community, from the industry. And in particular, most innovators who pitch, that's what they will get immediately. It's some level of validation, commentary. We provide guidance before the event through our advisory board and our process dragons, which are basically the guides and the folks who are asking the harder questions to innovators, but also helping them prepare. And that in itself, having someone who's independently and openly providing you with feedback on your idea. Remember, a lot of ideas that we come up with, innovations, are very personal, and they're ours, and we don't necessarily want to share them with the world because we want to avoid rejection, or maybe don't feel it's up to the level that's needed. So all of these things come in play. And what we say is, well, put your proposal in, we'll have a look, and if we feel that there's merit in it, then we'll try and help you to bring it on where we can and give you an opportunity to pitch it at the pick stage. And it's very much, we look at it as just an abundance attitude approach to finding innovations, because many of them stay hidden just because of that fear factor, right? So it's a little bit trying to dissolve that. But then we have others who are quite mature, very smart technologies. We had one a couple of years ago who submitted and didn't make it through to the final round, was not very happy about it because they believed and knew that they had a great innovation. And I got talking to that person and I explained to them, well, we didn't really get enough information from you to be able to understand what was the core innovation piece and the applicability. So there was some missing elements in the proposal. That person went away, came back the next year, proposed to us again, got shortlisted, and won the competition. So it's
right.
Sometimes it's obvious how innovative your idea can be, and it's obvious to everyone else. But more of the time, it's not obvious to everyone else. So having a platform like this where you have to position it in a way that, as I say to people sometimes, look, if a 10-year-old can't understand it, then you have a little bit of work to do on the communication idea. Many people have said to us that alone has been of great value to them, where they had to reevaluate how they are proposing and pitching their whole concept to fit into the pick. And by doing that, they learned a lot about what was important in the idea and really wasn't. If you have 4 minutes, you can't put in the 32 slides and the intros and all of that stuff, right? You have to just get it down to the bare key 2 points. And that's it. You have time to do that and very little else. So it really gets us to focus in on what's important.
One thing that I'm curious about when you were talking about abundance, there's usually abundance of ideas, but many people are still protective about their ideas. So how do you think about confidentiality when it comes to ideas? Because I think one of the reasons why people are afraid, you talked about fear of rejection or turning it down, judgment. What if I think I come up with something revolutionary and I don't want to share it publicly at a very early stage because I think that some other people might, let's say, steal the idea?
Yeah, absolutely understandable. And what I would say to people as well, where do you want to go in that tightrope? Do you want to maintain your IP completely until something magic happens and then things running, or do you want to test enough of what you can show to an audience who will probably be pretty on the money in terms of target audience and people who can give you very valid feedback? So I see it as a kind of a give and take situation where in most cases when we've had people bring that up, what we've said is, well, you don't have to share anything that is IP. You want the innovation to be seen as innovative, but you don't have to go through the nuts and bolts of it. In fact, that discussion with innovators tends to be about moving away from going into all of the details and focusing in more on the key outcomes, impacts, effects of the innovation, the applicability of it, and then the core innovative concept and why is it innovative? What does it do that's innovative? And rather than a lot of the other bells and whistles. So if you keep the focus on why is it innovative, what is the innovation, it tends to focus out the issues around IP and sharing information that you may not want to. And when it comes down to the pitch itself, we found that people actually get into storifying it a little bit more and talk about the actual impact for users and the impact for people who can gain something from it. And that, doesn't normally cover any IP when you go down that route.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned some of the improvements that you suggested to the people who are pitching their ideas, like how to make the pitch better and fit within the 4 minutes. What are the other tips that you would say for the people who want to apply to think about in their pitch deck?
I think it's goes back to the old argument of what would resonate to a potential user of your innovation, right? What would they like to see? If you were wearing the shoes of someone who's going to use that innovation, what would you like to see being proposed? What elements would you highlight? And I think it goes back to, the simple kind of structures when you talk about solutions and problems. One is, well, what is the challenge that it is solving? What is the need that it is serving? And so if you start with that and then move into, well, why is it important to solve that need or fix that challenge? How big is the hole? Once you scope that stuff out, then you can actually explain, okay, well, this is how we then solve or we fill in that hole. And this is what it does, a little bit about how it does it, and then here's how it benefits users and the applicability of it. Doing that or using a similar kind of structure to showing the innovation it ticks most of the boxes, right? It'll take the ROI box on benefits. It'll take the how big is the problem? Is it worth solving? Mm-hmm. Those kind of boxes. And then after that, you can get as detailed as you want on what are the potential, cost value arguments to do with the innovation. But if you follow that simple kind of a structure in 4 minutes, you can do little else. But I've seen people do it very effectively, and they build a story into it to really engage the audience. And with the pick at the moment, really what we do is we have the audience cast votes. So the audience and the dragons, normally we have 3 dragons, will cast votes and then determine how you get on and who wins the Process Innovation of the Year award. And that's, part of the fun and the little competitive element to it. But it's not really a competition just with that end, right? It's more about going through that process. And we've had people who had asked us about that they really didn't feel competitions were for them and were questioning whether they should submit their innovation. And our argument and discussion with them tends to be, well, the competition is just part of it. That's the head fake. The actual going through with this is going to help you understand how your innovation fits, whether it's an innovation that has value for other people. And you can determine it in a safe and comfortable environment because you're not alone. You have other innovators in the same situation potentially as yourself. So that's how we kind of get around, and that's where we find, particularly with folks who may be more introverted, who tend to, making a bit of a generalization here, but tend to have fantastic ideas and very deep thinking ideas, that enabling them to have a platform as well as anyone else.
You talked about how the process of voting goes, that there's also involvement of the community, and also you have the dragons. How do you value the votes of each individual party? Like, let's say the audience versus the dragons. Do the dragons have like more powerful votes?
We do weight it slightly, but every vote counts. And normally in the voting stack, we're dealing with somewhere between 100, 200 votes in total. That's typically the audience that we're talking to. Then we do have a weighting for the dragons, but the audience still has the majority of the voting weight, let's say. So we continue to evolve that, but it's actually, we believe, fairly open and fair, and gives every audience member a chance to pick the innovator they're interested in. And
yeah, you talked about the obvious inspiration from Dragon's Den or Shark Tank, and besides the publicity in these shows, it's also about getting the investment from dragons. And you also mentioned that some of the ideas that could come pitch for pick can be also early stage. So are you eventually thinking, or is it already possible, that people could be looking for actual investment to kickstart their idea?
Yeah, apart from the kind of mentorship gains, the growth gains, and all of those things, the biggest gain for people who get involved is visibility and being seen by the community, being seen on this platform, but seen by people at the event, and then post-event. For winners, they get part of the prize where is further visibility through things like Multilingual Magazine has supported in the past. And that is, I think, for a lot of the innovators, it's incredibly valuable and important. And in fact, we hear from innovators all the time who've been in the event, both participants and folks who've done well in the event, and just giving us an indication of how valuable it was to them, that they grew their contact base with other innovators, they grew their contact base with potential customers, they added customers over time, they turned those leads into sales, they were spotted by other groups and built partnerships. All of these things have happened as a direct result of the pick. And we had one case recently from a winner last year who told us that the pick was, in her words, a key part of them being able to pivot their focus for where their technology, which was to do with the video dubbing world, AI within video dubbing, where their technology should be pitched, and it gave them a contact list they didn't have of prospects, and now they've closed deals, and it's been part of multi-million-dollar revenue growth for them. And they were very straight about saying it. That is as a result of the pick, which we were a bit aghast by. We were saying, well, we'd like to think we're doing okay. But when you hear stories like that, it just validates for us that, yeah, this platform has a place, and for certain people, it can really be very valuable. But we hear stories like that all the time and get thank you notes and things like that. We do this on a basis of sticking to the original values that we have for creating and shining a light on innovations, basically enabling smart innovations to be seen. In terms of investment and VNCs and the like, this is something which we feel we can grow into, and we can certainly look at how we can create the link and the relationships there, and it's something that we're actively thinking and working on for future picks.
How do you differentiate an innovation from an already established product? Because I was looking at some videos that you had on YouTube when you recorded the online sessions, and I think some people were like, there were some new features for MemSource. I think I saw there was Adam with the model front, which are things that already existed. So how do you differentiate between I have something new and I have barely like one customer. Maybe I have a beta users testing out my product versus people who already have their product out there in the market.
Yeah, it's a great point. And we've kind of had it as a very flat platform for the moment. Like we did a differentiation a couple of years ago where we had two tracks, one which was process, so that kind of early stage kind of ideas, maybe focused more on process or supporting process than directly technology. And then we had second track technology only. And that was a way for us to kind of split the hairs a little bit and also to have like-minded folks, let's say, a degree, but also with like-minded innovations within each of the groups. Now, that's, I suppose, a starting point. One of the things that would need to be addressed is having similar types of innovations in terms of stage or size compete with each other. And it's certainly something which we haven't seen a situation where, the bigger and the best has necessarily won. So we feel that the voting and the way we have it is quite democratic in that if your innovation on the day doesn't look great or visually isn't presented as well as others, then maybe even though your innovation might be the best, it mightn't actually do it on the day. In fact, we've one of the things we look at when we look back is, what does it take to win a competition like this? And sure, having a good innovation is important, but more important is how is that innovation explained and presented? How do people accept it? And we found that a good enough innovation presented fantastically well typically will do better than a fantastic innovation presented okay. It's quite an interesting concept, but that's part of it. The showmanship is a part of it, and understanding how to communicate to the audience.
That's an interesting comment. I'm not sure how to ask this, because when you say the pitches that, let's say, appeal to the most people, that are entertaining, they can win. But you also said they may not be the best innovation. So it seems like you have an indication of what is the best innovation, but it doesn't win. So what is the best innovation to you?
It may be something that is more innovative just from the perspective of being innovative, right? So, and so underneath it had the best potential to be seen as the most innovative. My favorite innovations sometimes are the ones that are old innovations applied to a new problem.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it's recycling, repurposing an innovation, if you like, and applying it to a new problem. And suddenly people go, oh, yeah, because that's just being smart. That's basically saying, oh, we don't have to do this from scratch. We can actually take something that existed and we can adapt it and apply it to a brand new problem. To me, that's, innovation is about being smart as well. And as much as we all like to create stuff from scratch, if you can, be working on the backs of giants to a large degree, then you are playing the smart game. So I tend to like those ones as well.
One of the things that Dragon's Den does is that they revisit the innovations after some time. Have you ever done something like that?
We do. We try and keep an open channel with innovators from the past. It's something that we need to do more of, to be honest. But we do keep in touch and from time to time check in to see, well, how are they getting on? And invariably, it's also to see if they have any more innovations. Would they like to bring something else to the platform? And remember, we have asked people if they do submit and they get shortlisted, then that innovation, as it is, we don't want to see it proposed again. But that doesn't mean that if you have updated part of it and created a new innovative aspect to the overall technology, of course you can submit that again. So there's a continuous flow, if you like, of people continually innovating, and then if they want to submit a subsequent version. Now, what we would ask is that there's enough additional innovation in it to differentiate it from a previous one, but in most cases there is anyway, because innovators innovate.
Let's talk about the dragons. Who are they and how do you pick them? Are they like a stable team of dragons, or do you pick different people for each edition of Pip?
It's recycled group, so we change the dragons each version. That's something we're looking at now, is how to develop an overall advisory board approach, which we may do in 2021. But dragons tend to change on each version, and then we've had some dragons who have been in numerous versions and have really been fantastic supporters of the pick. And yeah, the dragons tend to be people who have a good understanding of the industry from a technological and process perspective, and have experience, dealing to some degree with innovations, but certainly dealing with getting challenges solved and problem solving.
So, as I understand, PIC used to be done as part of LocWorld, right? Before, was it in person during the events?
That's right. It's still part of LocWorld. Right now, we're more virtual, of course.
Right.
And it's part and parcel of the LocWorld agenda. So the next one is going to be the end of January to 2021, and we'll be there, and we have a good lineup of people there. But it's definitely it's been a very nice platform for us to work on and use, and LocWorld have been very good to the pick.
So how did you transition pick to online format?
Yeah, it was actually a lot more straightforward than many of these things, because we asked people to pitch for 4 minutes. Normally, what we try and do is, in a physical event, we would have all of the pitch decks together, and we create a kind of a fairly fast, fluid event. So once the first innovator gets on stage, they have 4 minutes. They then get asked questions from the audience and dragons, typically the dragons first, and then that's 2 minutes. So they're off stage after 7 minutes. The next one comes on immediately, and we just cycle through that for all of the innovators who are pitching ideas. So it's quite lively. It doesn't, there's a high level of energy in it, and it's a bit non-stop in the event itself. So that can transfer quite easily to the online world, that you basically have a very similar format, and within the hour we can have 6 or 7 innovators pitching, then Q&A, the next one, and then at the end of it all we do voting. So we've always had to use some kind of digital online voting system, because it's the audience and the dragons that vote. So we use online voting anyway at this point, and so that fits just fine with the digital and an online event. So actually, it was quite seamless. To be fair, you miss, of course, the reaction from the audience when someone has a tough question to answer, or they do very well, and of course you do. But online can work in its own way too.
Do you do it through Zoom, or how do you get the audience to join and participate with the voting?
We've used different technologies for the voting. We've used, I think, Slido was used at one stage. We've done direct poll. There's a couple of nice applications out there that can be used. Our mantra on this is always, simplify. Make it as easy as possible for people to vote. The function is we want to get the votes in. We then do less than 30 seconds of a discussion just to validate And one of the things we always do in the pick is we keep it as independent, because we want anybody to feel that they enter. It's absolutely fair. It is very important to maintain that level of independence. So all of those things that we do, voting for shortlisting people, and then the voting system itself is arbitrated and vetted, just done right, because at the end of the day, you want the audience and the dragons to have this say.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the pitchers answering the tough questions from the dragons. What do you think is like one of the toughest questions, or what is the question that the dragons have to ask, you think, like most of the time? So what is lacking in the pitches?
Applicability tends to come up. So how can we apply this innovation in a real environment? What is the value of it? Who are the personas, the use cases for the usage of it? So it's that tends to be the area that comes up, almost all of the time. Sometimes it's clarity on the innovative aspects. Why is it innovative? So there's a question that gets asked, because it mightn't be that obviously clear, right? It may be something that in the mind of the innovator, they see the innovation, but why is it innovative mightn't be that obvious to the audience. So I hear that one quite a lot as well. Those two tend to be leading, and then after that, it's the return. Have you measured it? What stage is it at? Is it deployed? Is it not? And a little bit more of the technical detail of where the innovation is at that point.
Mm-hmm. So speaking about the best and also the worst, what are the best and worst ideas, if you can share, in your experience?
Well, it's hard to judge best of worst, isn't it? As it's very much from the point of view of the observer. I'm a bit of a geek for innovation, so I like most of what comes in, as I mentioned. And I did mention the Julia's idea last year. To me that was almost a perfect innovation in the way it was presented, conceived, then the end game with the data to show and prove that it worked. The first pick that we did was quite amazing. We had a visual duel on stage between George Chow from Video Localize and an engineer from Microsoft, and they're both in the final. And we had a preliminary round the day before, and this was at Localization World. Then we told them to come back in the final the following day, and both of them worked on their pitches and their videos, because both of them had some kind of video involvement, real visual pitches, the night before. So instead of enjoying themselves at the event, they decided, they were just going, and they created this amazing spectacular on stage. Unfortunately, one of them had to win, but it was just quite amazing. That was the first pick, and we've have moments like that happen all the time. We don't have any worst ideas, but some have been interesting to see in how people have formed ideas, or maybe haven't come full circle on the full idea, or some parts are missing in it. Invariably an idea mightn't score well because we don't have enough information, right? So it seems like parts are missing, or it may be a direct sell of a product rather than letting the innovation shine. And we just try and guide people on that, and always in the call for papers we'll say, look, this is kind of what we're looking for. In many cases, as I mentioned, innovators have come back after first time not getting through, and been successful in subsequent times. And so to us, that's exactly what we want to see. No problem submitting and not getting through. Come back, try again, and we'd be happy to see you.
So speaking about innovators, do you think that anyone can innovate?
Yeah. I don't know if you remember the film Ratatouille.
I do, yes. My mom's favorite, yes.
Yeah, a great film. well, anyone can cook was one of the themes and mantras, right? And then I think they said, not anyone could cook, but the best cook could come from anywhere, right? And I think in innovation, I like to think anyone can innovate, but the best innovations can really come from anywhere, and that's why we've set this up, and we work and run the pick every year, a couple of times a year, because we know that there's innovations there, and innovators there who may be hidden, or may not have a platform, and this enables them to be seen, and for other people, for the audience to see, there's an innovator there. There's an amazing innovator right there. And we've seen that happen a number of times, and it's fantastic when it does, because then you know that that's just going to, that positive energy is going to increase the innovators' confidence. It's going to increase their ability to do more innovation, to build on the innovative idea. So yeah.
But do you really think that people go living their day and they just think about what could be better? Or is it only a few of the people who are trying to look at what could be improved?
I think it's more people than we might consider, and but it may stop at a certain point and say, well, I have too much to be doing, I need to focus here. I'd love to be able to spend time on that, but I really can't. And then you have other people who just, they see an idea and they follow it through, and they know it and they trust it, and they listen to that idea. So it becomes a guiding light for them. So sure, you'll have differences, but I don't think you could say that innovation is in a particular group, personality type, or anything like that. I think a lot of people have great ideas. What we're kind of trying to tease people to do is to follow through, submit it to the platform, and see how it fits. And there's no foul, nothing lost, gonna go. This isn't a situation where anyone's going to be saying anything one way or another about your innovation. It's everything we received. It's private. We do, as I mentioned, our vetting in confidence, and we don't let that information out. In fact, we have a policy not to share results, which we think is fair to everybody. So yeah, it's absolutely just go for it, give it a shot. And if nothing else, what I will say to anyone who's kind of thinking, oh, I have an idea, but I don't have time, I said, well, give it a go with the pick. And what you'll probably find is that you learn something. So if it's worth your time to learn something or connect with somebody you don't have a connection with, then go for it.
Mm-hmm. If I would take this concept of innovation to a company level, let's say to the culture, how can a company foster the culture of innovation, like to embrace that people come up with ideas and they're not shut down, or that they follow through, like you mentioned?
It has to, yeah. So ideas tend to be top bottoms up, right? So someone comes up with an idea, and then it's, oh, how can I apply this? And so if you can foster the culture for acceptability and enablement for people to build those ideas, then that enablement has to come top down, so that from the very top of an organization through the various layers, that they enable and allow ideas, no matter how the ideas seem, to actually have their day in the sun, to be validated in some way, or to be tested, maybe run proof of concepts on certain ideas, things like that. So you get the bottoms up ideas by enabling the culture top down. And I think there's plenty of books and approaches that you can take to enabling the culture, but it's that simple. It's if you don't at the top of the organization look to enable a culture of innovation and see that as an important part of doing business, then it's very hard for you to actually get the bottoms up innovations to pop up. You'll see them in certain groups that may be more innovative than others anyway, but you may not see a full culture of innovation. And an example I tend to use is where Amazon have an approach to this where they anyone who has an innovative idea or a proposal for setting up a product team or anything like that, they ask them to write a press release, a PR basically, that is then published internally on one of the Amazon internal servers for all to see. So these press releases come through each day, and you know, it can be short enough document release, but the idea is this, that you back your idea enough that you can write a press release for it, that you have no problem with anybody in the organization reviewing it. So of course you're going to write a very good press release. You're going to double check all your ideas, your ROI figures, the whole thing you're going to get right, because anybody in the organization could be seeing it. And in fact, you know, Jeff Bezos or whoever else in the senior hierarchy of that company do see it, and they then, if they see a fantastic idea and they like the proposal, they pick up the phone or send a message to that person. And many times what has happened is you have a senior VP or someone very high up in the food chain who says, look, I'm going to put X million behind your idea. Can you have a concept on my table, you know, next Wednesday, and let's develop this out? So be careful with your ideas on one side, but also that's a fantastic opportunity for someone who you know, knows and trusts in their innovative idea, that they can actually have support, top-down support, and a place to actually show their wares. So at the PIC, we you know, in a smaller way than the Amazon system, we would give a place to show the wares, and then we kind of leave it up to the community then to pick up and to like and follow up on innovations they want to.